O eternal and almighty God, from whom all power and wisdom come, we are assembled here before thee to frame such laws as may tend to the welfare and prosperity of our province. Grant, O merciful God, we pray thee, that we may desire only that which is in accordance with thy will, that we may seek it with wisdom and know it with certainty and accomplish it perfectly, for the glory and honor of thy name and for the welfare of all our people. Amen. We acknowledge we are gathered on Treaty 1 territory and that Manitoba is located on the treaty territories and ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Innuak, Dakota Oate, Dene, Tsuut'ina, and Nihithowug nations. We acknowledge Manitoba is located on the homeland of the Red River Métis. We acknowledge northern Manitoba includes lands that were and are the ancestral lands of the Inuit. We respect the spirit and intent of treaties and treaty making and remain committed to working in partnership with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people in the spirit of truth, reconciliation, and collaboration. Good afternoon, everybody. Please be seated. The Honourable House Leader for the Official Opposition on a matter of privilege.
Madam Speaker, I rise on a matter of privilege. It is a prima facie breach of privilege when a minister makes a statement that deliberately attempts to mislead this House. The Premier and all ministers in her government have a duty not to mislead members of this House and, by extension, all Manitobans. Yesterday, the Premier and her Health Minister did just that. They tried to mislead this House. They know they tried to do this, Madam Speaker, because they failed, and failed in a very public way to do so. Members of the official opposition tabled 2 letters yesterday. One was sent to the Health Minister in November. The other letter was from the Health Department, written just a few days ago. In the House, the Premier bizarrely stated the letter, which was sent by her own government, on the most serious of health matters, was not real. She stated, and I quote, "There is no letter that was tabled today," end quote. That's incompetence, Madam Speaker. But even worse, it shows an attempt to deliberately mislead the House, as these letters are in fact real, as media have easily and quickly confirmed. What's more, the Health Minister stated in this House that claims about the letters were, and I quote, "statements that are not factual and not based on any evidence," end quote. One of these letters was from the minister's own department, and the other was sent to her office in November. The minister says she had no prior knowledge of these letters, but refused to be honest with this House. I will table the Premier's and the Minister's comments from Hansard for review by yourself, Madam Speaker. The letters in question have been tabled in this House for review by the Speaker, and the evidence is clear. The attempt to deliberately mislead the House is wrong and a breach of privilege according to the House of Commons Procedure and Practice, page 83. It's clear that the House has been misled. It's clear the Premier and the Minister were responsible for attempting to mislead the House, and it's clear they intentionally attempted to do so because the only alternative explanation for their statements is a level of incompetence that is difficult to imagine even for this PC government. Manitobans deserve to have the Premier and the Minister of Health tell the truth when it comes to health care services in our province. This is my first opportunity to raise this matter, as I had to research these matters, consult with the authorities, and review the statements made yesterday in Hansard. As a result of the evidence presented before you, I move, seconded by the member for Union Station, that this matter be immediately referred to a standing committee of this House for debate and review. Miigwech.
Before recognizing any other members to speak, I would remind the House that remarks at this time by honourable members are limited to strictly relevant comments about whether the alleged matter of privilege has been raised at the earliest opportunity and whether a prima facie case has been established. The Honourable Government House Leader.
I won't take much time on that, Speaker. In some ways, I feel sorry for the opposition House Leader. I suspect that yesterday after question period, she went back to her office and was probably summoned by the Leader of the Official Opposition because he was embarrassed by what happened in question period yesterday, and I'm sure he demanded her to raise this scurrilous point of, or this matter of privilege, because...
Order.
Well, and now the member for Concordia is echoing that embarrassment as well, Madam Speaker, because what happened yesterday is that the Leader of the Opposition, who is now heckling from his seat and is still embarrassed yesterday, tabled an unsigned letter, Madam Speaker, which was pointed out by members on this side that the letter had no signature. There was actually no names on the letter, Madam Speaker. Now, when we're actually sitting in debate here in question period and somebody tables something and says this is a valid letter, it would normally have names on it to actually determine whether or not that is correct or not. So I understand that the Leader of the Official Opposition is embarrassed by his mistake yesterday, and that's fine. We all have moments of mistakes in the House, and yesterday he had one, Madam Speaker. But maybe what this really points to is that there needs to be some discussion about our rules, that when an individual tables a letter in the House, that we can actually ensure that it's a valid letter, that it's actually signed by somebody. And we can identify who that person is so we can have a debate about the contents of that letter. So I feel sorry for the opposition House Leader that she was demanded to bring forward this matter of privilege to try to cover up for the mistake of the official opposition leader. And I look forward to seeing what other mistakes he has in a few minutes when we get on to question period, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for River Heights.
Madam Speaker, in this chamber, in my experience over a fair number of years, the government and the opposition, and when they were reversed, that letters were tabled often with names blacked out and not readable. So it's not all that unusual to have letters without names, just because people are trying to protect people from being not only sort of recognized, but the fear under this government is that people who are named could be punished or ostracized in some fashion. And we've certainly had some experiences along those lines, Madam Speaker. The other thing that I want to comment on is that we've had in this session far too many accusations of other members speaking falsehoods. Now, that may not be an unparliamentary word, but it's as close as you possibly can be to accusing the person who has the member, the honourable member of this House, for an L-I-E, I won't say the word, because it's unparliamentary, but I think that the Speaker, you as Speaker, need to review some of the language, because I think it's going over the line in terms of the nature and the amount that is really unparliamentary. Thank you.
A matter of privilege is a serious concern. I am going to take this matter under advisement to consult the authorities and will return to the House with a ruling. Routine proceedings, introduction of bills. The honourable member for Rossmere.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move, seconded by the honourable member for Springfield Richot, that Bill 237, the Advanced Education Administration Amendment Act be now read a first time.
It has been moved by the Honourable Member for Rossmere, seconded by the Honourable Member for Springfield-Rashott, that Bill number 237, the Advanced Education Administration Amendment Act, be now read a first time. The Honourable Member for Rossmere.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Since being founded in 1925, Providence University College has grown into a multi-campus institution that has graduated thousands of students with accredited degrees and internationally recognized qualifications. While Providence's current classification in the Act was suitable at the time of writing, over past decades the institution has matured, it meets all the requirements, and now interacts in every sense as a peer to other Manitoba universities. This relatively minor amendment acknowledges that reality by listing Providence alongside its peer institutions here in the province of Manitoba.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed and so ordered. Committee reports. Tabling of reports. The Honourable Minister of Consumer Protection and Government Services.
Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to table the actuarial valuation report as of December 31st, 2021 from the Public Service Group Insurance Fund.
And in accordance with Section 19.5, Bracket 2 of the Legislative Assembly and Executive Council Conflict of Interest Act, I am tabling the annual report of the Conflict of Interest Commissioner for the year ending December 31st, 2022. Ministerial statements. The Honourable Minister of Education, and I would indicate that the required 90 minutes notice prior to routine proceedings was provided in accordance with Rule 27, Bracket 2. Would the Honourable Minister please proceed with his statement?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to start off by welcoming Wanapegao School and also Gonzaga Middle School for attending this afternoon's session. Madam Speaker, it is my pleasure to rise in the House today to invite all members of the Manitoba Legislature in recognizing the importance of education in our communities and to celebrate this week, April 17th to April 21st, 2023, as Education Week right here in Manitoba. Education Week honors the education and schools that we have right here in Manitoba. Education opens doors of opportunities for all Manitoba students. Many of us have spent time in classrooms, learning fundamentals to all learning, and allowing us to understand, create, communicate, and interact with others and the world around us. The skills learned in schools become our own through the guidance and perseverance, talents, and support of educators and educational leaders in our schools and our communities. Today, we have the opportunity to turn our attention to the valuable contributions of the dedicated educators, school staff, bus drivers, principals, administrators, business professionals, and mentors who work in collaboration with our education communities. Learning does not end after grade 12 graduation. A mindset embracing lifelong learning can guide the way to a future enriched by educational, workplace, and community service experiences, all of which contribute to both personal well-being and the success of our province. This government values educators in Manitoba, so we are pleased to take this opportunity to extend appreciation and to reflect on the importance of education and its contribution to Manitoba's future. I would like to take this time to express my sincere appreciation to the committed educators, school staff, bus drivers, principals, and administrators for their dedication, flexibility, thoughtful care, and consideration for our students, families, and fellow staff. Let us all take a moment to reflect on the importance of education and its contribution to Manitoba's future. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Transcona.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. I've read with interest a proclamation released by the province of Manitoba with regards to Education Week. There's absolutely no doubt we need to lift everyone who has been working in our schools for the last 7 years. They have been through a lot, and while at the same time having to deal with a reluctant partner in this current provincial government. A government that introduced Bill 64 during the pandemic, where all decision-making was going to be centered in one provincial education authority. a government that has continually underfunded public ed from the time they were elected, Madam Speaker, a government that has yet to meaningfully deal with the scourge that is child and family poverty, a government that has yet to fulfill its promise regarding the education library resources that were once housed on Portage Avenue, cut by this government and said they were going to be put online. A government that has allowed class sizes, Madam Speaker, to continually increase at a time when we need individual student attention. A government that stood by while Pembina Trails cut their full-time kindergarten program. A government that did nothing to prevent the elimination of the IB program in 2 school divisions. And a government, Madam Speaker, that will not make the new funding model public until after the election. And a government that has failed time after time to walk together in partnership with school divisions as they endeavor to try to meet the ever-increasing needs of kids, families, and communities. So yes, Madam Speaker, for this Education Week, let us honor those working in schools who have risen to the challenge and are having to deal with a reluctant partner in this Stephenson government. Thank you.
Well done.
The honourable member for Tyndall Park.
Madam Speaker, I seek leave to respond to the minister's statement.
Does the member have leave to respond to the ministerial statement? Leave has been granted. The honourable member for Tyndall Park.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to speak about Education Week, and I think we have to begin by thanking and recognizing everyone who works within education here in Manitoba. We know the last few years in particular were unpredictable, and those working in our schools really stepped up and found ways to adapt curriculums and school days the best way possible to meet the very different needs of parents and children, all while working within the rules being announced. Education creates opportunities, it brings people together, and it is what helps our society grow. And this is why we need to continue to strive for affordable and accessible education, as it is a child's right, and we want to encourage the pursuance of it. Most of us will reflect fondly on at least parts of our education experience, and these reflections will often include feelings of inspiration, lessons, and care from educators. It demonstrates how teachers impact students all of the time, sometimes in big or in small ways, and sometimes in ways one could least expect. And this is why we as a province need to implement a universal child nutrition program. We need to take a more effective learning approach for children with learning disabilities. We need to have better mental health supports for K-12 and post-secondary students. And we have to have smoother credential recognition and accreditation pathways. And we need more resources for our schools and for our teachers, Madam Speaker. Before wrapping up, I want to again thank all of those who are working in our education system for all of your hard work every day as you inspire the next generation of leaders, and thank the Minister for bringing forward the statement today. Thank you.
Member statements. The honourable member for Portage-La Prairie.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today I'm honored to rise to recognize the Portage Industrial Exhibition Association, who is celebrating 150 years. It is the oldest active agricultural society in Manitoba, with the distinction of being Western Canada's oldest continually running fair.
Right.
The date was October 16th, 1872, when the community of Portage-La Prairie was experiencing the first successful Western Canadian agricultural exhibition. With 400 entries at the fair, it was declared to have surpassed expectations, as the population of Portage-La Prairie at the time was only 300 people. By 1894, the organization had evolved into the Portage and Lakeside Agricultural Society, and the fair moved from downtown Portage to its current location next to Island Park. By 1907, the Portage Industrial Exhibition had been incorporated and added an additional 15 acres and several new buildings to the grounds. And in 1922, on the 150 years of the fair, the first Ferris wheel made its appearance in the Midway. The Portage Fair, or Portage X, as it is often called, has gone through many changes in 150 years. Since the late 1800s, the Portage Fairgrounds has hosted livestock and horse shows like those that took place in the early days of the community. After over 100 years of horse racing, Portage X Racetrack and Grandstand was demolished to make way for the construction of Stride Place, a beautiful recreation facility for the benefit of the entire community. A new exhibition building and fair board office were also built. Just like the agricultural industry we honor, the Portage Industrial Exhibition has continued to adapt and evolve with a dedicated volunteer board and staff. The plan to not only maintain their schedule, but to expand services and reinvest for the future, which will ensure that Portage X continues to be a mecca of the agricultural celebration for many years to come. Congratulations to the Portage X, and we have in the gallery 2 members of the executive.
The honourable member for Q8 Nook.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise once again today to speak about the importance of the orange shirt and the need to make Orange Shirt Day a statutory holiday here in Manitoba. Today in Manitoba, when it comes to Orange Shirt Day, it is not a time to disagree on the definition or interpretation of words like holiday or remembrance, because by doing so, it takes away from reconciliation, which is what Orange Shirt Day should symbolize for our young people. I am joined today by the high school students from the Winnipeg School, more specifically, the Truth and Reconciliation class. The fact that our Indigenous communities are taking the steps to educate our own communities on truth and reconciliation should be a testament for the need to have Orange Shirt Day recognized as a statutory holiday across our province, so that all Manitobans will have the opportunity to learn, discuss, and educate themselves on what Orange Shirt Day means to Indigenous people. Madam Speaker, not having Orange Shirt Day as a statutory holiday from work means that not all Manitobans will have that opportunity to participate in events, gatherings, and discussions on what Orange Shirt Day means. And Madam Speaker, shouldn't we all have the opportunity to participate, to be included, to be involved, to walk together on the path of reconciliation? I know the vast majority of all Manitobans want to see Orange Shirt Day made into a statutory holiday here in Manitoba. This call is not just coming from Indigenous communities, it is coming from business leaders, from educators, from students, from our children, and from our elders. It is coming from every demographic across our diverse province. Orange Shirt Day is not a matter of one political party claiming that they got the win on reconciliation here in Manitoba, but rather the message should be that we all came together to do the right thing. And that right thing is passing Bill 203 and proclaiming Orange Shirt Day as a statutory holiday here in Manitoba. Madam Speaker, the students in the gallery are here today because of the resilience and perseverance of their parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents to survive the devastating impacts of the residential school system. They are here in a building that was never meant for Indigenous people. So I ask all members to join me in thanking the students for joining us here today. I am honored as they include the Manitoba Legislature and all members of this chamber in their journey on the path of reconciliation. Miigwech.
The honourable member for Kildonan River East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's official. I'm pleased to share the Country Roots Market and Garden have officially opened their doors for the season. It's been a long, cold winter, and yes, there's even talk of a whiteout. But when we see that open for business sign, it's a reminder that summer is just around the corner. Country Roots, formerly known as Petrasco Brothers, has been a staple in our community and the go-to destination for farm fresh vegetables and outstanding flowers for as long as I can remember, Madam Speaker. Located on the corner of Henderson Highway and the Chief Peguis Trail, Country Roots is just a stone throw's walk for the hundreds of seniors who welcome the convenience of fresh vegetables just down the street from their homes. Madam Speaker, when Ed Petrasco decided to retire back in 2009, it's no surprise he encouraged his most dedicated employee, Kathy Plickett, to take over the business. In 1978, straight out of school, Kathy started as a seasonal employee, and 45 years later, she's grown Country Roots into a thriving and vital business that attracts people from across the city. Kathy, together with her daughters, Tiana and Sierra, always go above and beyond. They strive to provide each customer that walks through their doors with the best selection of fresh fruits, vegetables, bedding plants, pumpkins, and even Christmas trees. Kathy is always quick to thank the local farmers who toil in the fields. She attributes Country Roots' success to the overwhelming support she receives from our community, calling it a blessing. Madam Speaker, Country Roots is my go-to place for all my gardening needs. With the thousands of bright and beautiful flowers, hundreds of hanging pots, and a bounty of vegetable plants, I always end up making many, many return visits. Madam Speaker, my motto is shop local. And if you're in the market for gluten-free products, pierogies, local jams, pickles, fresh breads, or perhaps a unique gift for that special someone, Country Roots is your one-stop shop. Gardening nourishes the soul, Madam Speaker, and there's nothing more satisfying than that very first taste of the very first vine-ripened strawberry.
The member's time has expired. Is there leave to allow the member to complete her statement? Leave has been granted. The honourable member for Kildonan River East.
Thank you to all the members for that. Or the feeling of bliss as we experience the beauty and the awesome flowers and fragrances of those wonderful flowers and the grass, the green grass, just everything that only Mother Nature can bring and provide to us. Madam Speaker, I am honored to express my heartfelt thanks to Kathy and her amazing team for brightening our lives and growing our community. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Concordia.
For 7 years, this PC government has frozen and cut funding across our public education system. And these cuts have consequences, as school divisions have had to make impossible decisions about the programs they offer. This has recently impacted the students at Collège Miles MacDonnell Collegiate in River East Transcona School Division. For over 40 years, Miles Mac has offered the International Baccalaureate program. Now, due to chronic underfunding by the Stephenson government, the school division has been left no option but to cut services and programs like IB. The IB program follows an international curriculum that fosters a positive worldview. Students are taught how to become well-rounded individuals who are ready for university and postgraduate learning. The IB program encourages students to think critically and gives high schoolers the skills to be more equipped for the increasingly globalized and rapidly changing world. The IB program has allowed students in Northeast Winnipeg an opportunity to go above and beyond as they explore their many talents and potentials, all within the public education system. The IB program is just the latest example of the cuts that this PC government has forced on school divisions across the province. In River East Transcona School Division alone, the division was forced to cut 13 library staff that will impact reading and access to resources. Despite a huge influx of students from Ukraine, this division in the division this year, 471 and counting, the newcomer support grant program to support them was severely underfunded. And because of PC cuts to the division, it has taken the unprecedented step this year of going from a budget surplus to borrowing money just to keep the lights on. This government's cuts have severely hurt our students across the province. Under this government, we've seen larger class sizes, less support for students, and fewer positive opportunities. Enough of these PC cuts. Manitoban students deserve better, and our NDP team will fight for the support they need to succeed. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Education and Early Childhood Learning.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And now for something far more uplifting, Madam Speaker. It is my pleasure to rise today to deliver a private member statement to talk about all the amazing upcoming events being held in the Lac du Bonny constituency. As we are coming into our spring and summer months, there are so many great events to look forward to. Coming up in the constituency, we have Canada Day weekend celebrations from June 30th to July 2nd, organized by the Lac du Bonny Lions Club. Some of the best fireworks in Manitoba, Madam Speaker. Pinawa's birthday weekend celebration, where there will be live music, fishing tournaments, car shows, and plenty of food. Victoria Beach's Summer Winds Music Festival. That's held yearly in Victoria Beach, and it's organized entirely by volunteers. This festival includes activities the entire family can enjoy. The Fire and Water Music Festival happens each and every year, August long weekend in Lac du Bonny. The weekend will be filled with friends, family, and fun, showcasing some of the best entertainment, not only in Manitoba, but across Canada, Madam Speaker. The 5th Boreal Shores Art Tour, a free, road trip-worthy, self-guided art tour that features artists and galleries at locations scattered throughout the boreal forest and shore regions of eastern Manitoba. Powerview Pine Falls annual 4P Festival, paper, peas, power, and pickerel. This festival includes a fishing tournament, music, kids zone, fireworks, street hockey, slow pitch, and so much more, Madam Speaker. Beausejour's Double B Agriculture Festival, formerly known as the Double B Rodeo and Country Fair, which has highlighted summer events in the Beausejour-Broken Head area. This event provides us with the semi-pro rodeo, the Manitoba High School rodeo, and you'll also find ag displays, petting zoos, a parade, and of course, fireworks, Madam Speaker. Let's continue to support our communities by attending events and continue to take the time to thank our volunteers for their efforts on making these events successful. I encourage all to come out to the Lac du Bonny constituency for a visit or stay this spring and or summer, and there is no shortage of family-friendly outdoor activities to enjoy. Lac Tabani has something for everyone. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
There are some guests in the gallery that I would like to introduce to you. We have seated in the public gallery from Gonzaga Middle School 50 grades 6, 7, and 8 students under the direction of Siobhan Faulkner, and this group is located in the constituency of the Honourable Member for Point Douglas. On behalf of all MLAs here, we welcome all of you to the Manitoba Legislature. Oral questions. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
The Grace Hospital is struggling to offer a basic standard of care. That's according to the frontline experts, the surgeons who deliver joint surgeries there. They're calling on this government to reverse course and to stop the cuts. In fact, these surgeons at the Grace have come up with solutions to be able to provide more hip and knee surgeries to Manitobans at their hospital. But did this government listen to them? No, they didn't. Instead, this premier turned around and told these surgeons to cut the number of surgeries at the Grace by 20%. Why did the premier tell these surgeons to reduce the number of surgeries by 20%?
The Honourable First Minister.
Madam Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition continues to put false information on the record in this chamber, Madam Speaker. In fact, we received, or the Surgical and Diagnostic Task Force received, a proposal from Grace Hospital to perform an additional 200 orthopedic joint day procedures, Madam Speaker. And of course, the task force has supported that proposal, and that will move forward, Madam Speaker. That's 200 more surgeries. The Leader of the Opposition should apologize to Manitobans.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a supplementary question.
This is the truth, Madam Speaker. The proposal has been made to this government and it was rejected. The proposal of these surgeons was rejected by this government every step of the way. Only after our advocacy did it come to light that, in fact, not only did the PC government reject the proposal, but they actually asked these same surgeons to cut the number of surgery appointments for hip and knee surgeries by 20%. Why did the Premier tell these surgeons to reduce the number of surgeries by 20%?
The Honourable First Minister.
Madam Speaker, a proposal was received by the Surgical and Diagnostic Task Force to perform, from Grace Hospital, to perform 200 more hip and knee surgeries. That proposal was not rejected, as the Leader of the Opposition said. That proposal has been accepted, Madam Speaker, and those surgeries will take place at the Grace Hospital. The Leader of the Opposition, once again, continues to put false information on the record in this chamber. He needs to stand up and apologize, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a final supplementary.
The Premier is desperate to try and distract from her record of cutting health care in Manitoba. It started back when she was Brian Pallister's Deputy Premier. It continued under her time as Brian Pallister's Health Minister right through today as the Premier of this province. I think we'll listen to the doctors on this one and not the PCs. And what the surgeons at the Grace Hospital have told us is that the PCs not only rejected their proposal, but they told those surgeons to reduce the number of surgeries for hip and knee procedures by 20%. Why did the Premier say no to more procedures, and why did she turn around and then tell those surgeons to cut the number of surgeries by an additional 20%?
Order. Order. The Honourable First Minister.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And in fact, we are listening to doctors, Madam Speaker. That's why the Surgical and Diagnostic Task Force accept the proposal from the Grace Hospital to perform 200 more hips and knee surgeries at the Grace Hospital, Madam Speaker. That is 200 more hip and knee surgeries, Madam Speaker. That's more, not less, like the Leader of the Opposition seems to claim, Madam Speaker.
Order. I'm going to remind members that when there are students in the gallery, I really think there needs to be great behavior on the floor of the House and great respect shown for the democratic process here, and that means listening to both questions and answers. So I'm going to ask for everybody's cooperation. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a new question.
Yes, we're going to demonstrate why you just can't believe the PCs when it comes to health care. So we all know that Brian Pallister did a lot of damage to health care here in Manitoba. In August of 2021, he announced $812 million on health care capital. I will table the press release that goes along with this announcement. The Premier endorsed Mr. Pallister's plan. She promised to follow through on it. However, these FIPA documents, Freedom of Information requests that we just got back, show that 20 months later, only 6% of those dollars have actually been implemented. And I'll table that research to prove the case. It's clear that you can't trust the PCs when it comes to health care. Why has the Premier broken her promises to Manitobans on the subject of health?
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, Madam Speaker, we continue to make record investments, historic investments in our healthcare system in the province of Manitoba. Almost $8 billion just this year alone, Madam Speaker, that will be invested in healthcare in the province. Almost $2 billion more than when the NDP was in power, Madam Speaker. That's a 23% increase to the healthcare budget during that time. That's more, not less, Madam Speaker. In fact, just over last year alone, it's a 9.2% increase, or $668 million more to the operating budget for the province of Manitoba, Madam Speaker. And we will continue to make those investments, both capital investments as well as operating investments in our public health care system in the province of Manitoba.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a supplementary question.
I've got to correct the record. It's not investments with this government, it's announcements.
That's right.
They make an announcement, but they don't follow through, as has just been proven by those documents, which the Premier did not contest and therefore accepts. They made a huge announcement a few years ago, and up to date, only 6% of those funds have actually made their way out the door. We know the real world impact is being felt in communities like Brandon. I'll table another government announcement that said that the Brandon Regional Health Centre upgrades were already supposed to be completed right now. They're still doing announcements on this project years later, Madam Speaker, and it's patients who are feeling the impact. Why has the Premier failed to keep her promises when it comes to health care for Manitobans?
The Honourable First Minister.
Madam Speaker, we continue to make record investments, both capital investments in our healthcare system as well as operating investments, so that those people who are looking for surgical and diagnostic procedures are able to get them, Madam Speaker. The Leader of the Opposition will know that there was a worldwide pandemic, Madam Speaker, and obviously there has been some delays to some things, Madam Speaker, and we know that's nothing that's unique to Manitoba, but we'll continue to move forward to ensure that those capital investments get made.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on the final supplementary.
Madam Speaker, the announcements, the promises broken by the Premier that we're referring to here, these were made after the third wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. So again, the Premier's trying to use COVID-19 as a shield to escape from the fact that she herself has broken these promises. They made a commitment to invest a certain amount of money, and to date, only 6% of the progress has been made. All the students here today know what would happen if they got 6% in one of their courses. They would fail. just like this Premier, is failing Manitobans when it comes to health care. Why did the Premier mislead Manitobans and break her promises on health?
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, I think the students in the gallery should know and understand that we're continuing to make record investments in our healthcare system. So while the Leader of the Opposition continues to put factually incorrect information on the floor of this chamber, Madam Speaker, we'll continue to correct that record. The Leader of the Opposition, all Manitobans should know, as well as the students in the gallery, should also know that we are making record investments in Portage la Prairie, in Neepawa, in Selkirk, in Brandon, in St. Boniface, and in Flin Flon, Madam Speaker. Those investments are continuing to be made, Madam Speaker. We will continue to move forward. We know that there were some challenges with respect to the worldwide pandemic, and I know the Leader of the Opposition just wants to dismiss that as nothing. But it's not true, Madam Speaker. We need to take those factors into consideration, Madam Speaker. We will continue to make historic investments in our healthcare system in the province of Manitoba.
The Honourable Member for Union Station.
Madam Speaker, yesterday it was revealed that the PCs are putting their ideology of cuts and privatization ahead of patient outcomes. The Sleep Disorder Centre is a national best practice standard across the country, and Manitoba is a leader nationwide in this area, and yet the PC's approach is putting that work at risk. Despite the fact that there is existing underutilized capacity in our public system, the PC government turned down proposals from doctors at the Sleep Disorder Centre because of, and I'll quote, minimal private sector involvement, end quote. When will this Premier come clean with Manitobans on the full extent of her plan to privatize healthcare in Manitoba?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Due to the efforts of our government and the Diagnostic and Surgical Recovery Task Force, to date, 22,335 additional Manitoba patients have received their procedure through the request for supply arrangement, Madam Speaker. When it comes to health care, our government is focused on patients and not politics. Under the NDP's ideological approach, these Manitobans would still be waiting for care.
Shame.
The Honourable Member for Union Station on a supplementary question.
Madam Speaker, despite the abundance of devastating evidence to the contrary, this PC minister thinks that 7 years of cuts and chaos was the right thing to do for Manitobans. These two doctors, who are specialists with the Sleep Disorder Centre, were compelled to resign from their positions on this minister's wait times task force, indicating that, and I'm going to quote here, Madam Speaker, by staying on as part of the task force, it implies that we're part of the decisions that are being made. It hasn't been our experience, end quote. Will this minister put a halt to her privatization agenda and finally start working with frontline specialists who indicate that they could do far more and finally get the needs of Manitobans met in our public system?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to share some facts with Manitobans about how our government is investing in the public health system. $4.9 million for a fifth operating room at Concordia Hospital, $141 million to triple the size of the St. Boniface Emergency Department, $50 million to increase Health Sciences Centre surgical and diagnostic capacity, $30 million to increase ICU bed baselines from 72 to 100, 80 new physician training seats, $800,000 for 30 new nurse training seats at Red River, $2 million for Swan River CT scanner. Madam Speaker, I have a list of 4 pages that I can continue to share with Manitobans.
Hear, hear. The Honourable Member for Union Station on a final supplementary.
Madam Speaker, just more empty announcements from this health minister, while the obfuscation and obstructionism from this health minister are unreal. We know that she'll hide from media and answering questions. She'll dodge them every day leaving this house. She refuses to listen to frontline providers. All of that is typical from this Minister of Health. There are 6,600 Manitobans waiting to be assessed for potential sleep disorders, and these specialists had a plan that would have eliminated the current wait list in 3 years. Given that the PC privatization plan for sleep testing has failed to even make a dent in the wait list, will the minister instead invest in the public system and enhance services at Misericordia's Sleep Disorder Center?
Very good.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Madam Speaker, I need to call on the member for Union Station to apologize to Manitobans for what we're hearing today in the chamber. Does the member
Not true.
want to tell Manitobans who are suffering from cystic fibrosis that it was an empty promise when our government expanded coverage for Trikafta? And this is for patients age 6 and older. Does the member want to do that? Does the member want to apologize to cancer patients for saying that it was an empty promise when our government created specialized CAR-T cancer therapy program? Does the member for Union Station want to apologize for saying $4 million investment to expand?
The member's time has expired. Order. The Honourable Member for St. John's.
Well, we know that the PC government does not respect collective bargaining, and everyone in Manitoba knows that they've made a mess of our provincial health care. Paramedics in rural Manitoba, pharmacy techs, MRI techs, radiation therapists, and 190 other allied health professionals have had their wages frozen for 5 years. That's during a cost of living crisis, Madam Speaker, and that's why 99% of these healthcare workers have voted to strike. Yep. Will the Premier give allied healthcare workers a fair deal today and get up in the House and apologize to each and every one of them?
The Honourable Minister for Consumer Protection and Government Services.
Madam Speaker, few people believe the Leader of the Opposition. I think even fewer might believe the House Leader, and really nobody should when they speak on this issue or many other topics. What the member has just asserted is completely false. What we have done as a government is arrived at one collective agreement after the other in healthcare. Each and every single one of those agreements has included compounding increases. Each and every one of those agreements has included retroactive pay. I fully expect that the agreements that we're working on negotiating through Shared Health, or that Shared Health is working on negotiating, will include those same provisions. The member opposite should retract what she has said and apologize to this House.
The Honourable Member for St. John's on a supplementary question.
So as I was saying, thousands of frontline healthcare professionals have voted in favor of a strike. 99% of allied health professionals feel disrespected by this Stephenson government and each and every one of her PC MLAs. This is an unprecedented mandate, and it's a clear sign that they've had enough of this PC government's incompetence. This PC government is the employer, and they set the mandate for Shared Health's negotiating team. Will this PC government stop disrespecting allied health workers and negotiate a fair deal today?
The Honourable Minister for Consumer Protection and Government Services.
Madam Speaker, Shared Health is the employer in this case. And I would recommend that that member stop agitating in such a way as to disrupt the bargaining process. I know she doesn't want to accept my advice, so I'll see if perhaps she can accept this person's. I'll quote, "I believe and I know that collective bargaining can be a very delicate process. I don't think any one of us in this House would want to interfere with that process, would want to see that process go off the rails because they want to take political advantage of the situation. Who said that? And I'll table it. Jennifer Howard.
Order. The honourable member for St. John's on a final supplementary.
I know that the minister is emotional and upset because his government's cuts have thrown healthcare into chaos. A wage freeze for 5 years during a cost of living crisis, and that's the policy of his government. In some cases in community health, addiction counselors, mental health workers, and other frontline professionals have been waiting for even longer than 6 years. On this side of the House, we respect allied healthcare professionals.
That's right.
Why has this PC government failed to give them a fair deal?
The Honourable Minister of Consumer Protection and Government Services.
Madam Speaker, we value the work of allied healthcare professionals and all care professionals. We want this collective bargaining process to come to its logical conclusion, but we will not meddle. Now, the members opposite should be looking after the interests of all Manitobans, but they don't.
That's right.
Instead, they seek only to advance their own narrow political interests. Yeah. And their leader can't even seem to do that. Instead, he puts himself first.
Yeah.
He looks after his own self-interest, and he can't even put his own interests ahead of the interests of his colleagues, and I can tell by the looks on their faces, they know that what I'm saying is true.
Order. The honourable member for Transcona.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. School divisions across the province are having to make cuts just to keep the lights on. River East Transcona had to cut 13 library staff. Pembina Trails, imagine, Pembina Trails had to eliminate full-day kindergarten. And now we've learned that Seven Oaks School Division, Madam Speaker, has had to lay off all of their social workers at the end of this school year. That's the state of education under this PC government. Less supports for our kids, less supports for our communities, and less supports for our families. Will the Premier finally admit that her cuts to education have been hurting students?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Early Childhood Learning.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, gives me an opportunity in front of some fantastic students as well to correct the record as opposed to what is being put on the record today by the member from Transcona. $100 million this year alone in K-12 education. That's a 6.1% increase. That is something, Madam Speaker, that unfortunately the member from Transcona calls mere crumbs. I would like him to stand in his place and apologize to the students in the gallery that $100 million, a 6.1% increase to the K-12 education system is a big chunk of change, Madam Speaker. We're looking out for their best interests. He's looking out for his own and his leader's best interests.
The honourable member for Transcona on a supplementary question.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. This minister knows that that funding announcement has been called a drop in the bucket by many in this province. And as a matter of fact, Madam Speaker, they've been underfunding education since 2016, and the chickens are coming home to roost right now. And they're in every one of the school divisions in this province. And now we've learned, Madam Speaker, that Seven Oaks is being forced to lay off social workers as we emerge from a pandemic. It doesn't make any sense. Social workers provide invaluable support to students, and this is moving our province in the wrong direction. Will the Premier simply stand up today and admit that these cuts are harming students?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Early Childhood Learning.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, it gives me great pleasure to be able to stand up today and say that over the last few years, we have increased money to education by a tune of 23%, Madam Speaker. That's 23%. Madam Speaker, I'm not sure what's going on that side of the House, Madam Speaker, but the member from Transcona, unfortunately, just so that the students in the gallery know who's speaking the truth and who's not in this chamber, Madam Speaker, but I am going to table a document that shows the member from Transcona standing on the street corner saying, "Help me, I'm poor." He's a retired teacher, retired administrator, making $100,000 as an MLA. Madam Speaker, what is he thinking? What is he thinking?
A word of caution that using language like speaking the truth is going down a slippery slope towards unparliamentary language, so I'm going to urge everybody to be very careful in the language that is used here. The Honourable Member for Transcona on a final supplementary.
Oh, thank you, Madam Speaker. Imagine the NDP supporting workers for getting a fair contract. Just imagine every one of us being on the picket lines every day supporting workers for what they deserve every day. That's lost on this crew, Madam Speaker. Absolutely lost. And on this side of the House, furthermore, on this side of the House, we think that students need more supports, not less. It's time for the PCs to do the right thing and get on board, Madam Speaker. Will the Premier then finally admit that these cuts hurt students and commit to stop cutting education today?
That's right.
The Honourable Minister of Education and Early Childhood Learning.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. 23% increase to the K-12 system, $100 million this coming 23-24 school year alone, 6.1% increase. Not crumbs, as the member from Transcona states. It's unfortunate that his living wage isn't just $100,000, Madam Speaker. It's a shame that his colleagues back him up on that side of the House. Wow. Madam Speaker, I was just making it clear and very abundantly clear to students in the gallery and all Manitobans, Madam Speaker, the NDP show once again they cannot absolutely be trusted with anybody's finances, anybody's education processes, Madam Speaker. We're going to get it right on this side. We're working hard for success for all students, no matter where they live in this great province of ours, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Kiweetnook.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Premier's announcement that she will not make Orange Shirt Day a stat holiday this year was disappointing. It's disappointing for the communities and thousands of Manitobans and the students in the gallery who want the opportunity to participate in events, gatherings, and discussions, but will not have that opportunity because Orange Shirt Day is not a stat holiday here in Manitoba. Manitobans have called on this PC government to do the right thing and make Orange Shirt Day a stat holiday. The Premier claims ongoing consultation is to blame, yet we know the Premier is not engaging in these discussions. Can the Premier explain why she continues to refuse to make Orange Shirt Day a statutory holiday in Manitoba?
Oh, the Honourable Minister for Indigenous Reconciliation. The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Reconciliation.
And I want to be very clear. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to be very clear with the member opposite that he is very well aware, as are all of his colleagues, that this symbol of Orange Shirt Day as reconciliation in the province of Manitoba is a very high priority for myself and my colleagues. And I want to say hello to the students that are in the gallery adorning their orange shirts today. I'm actually very proud of what Manitobans have accomplished. They don't take this as a one-day holiday where they can be doing a whole variety of activities that show no sense of reconciliation.
The member's time has expired. And I'm going to ask the member to pull the mic down a little bit so that we can hear better when she's responding to questions. The Honourable Member for Kuwait-Nook on a supplementary question.
Just last month, the Premier pretended to support Orange Shirt Day. She voted in favour of our bill. Bill 203 would have made Orange Shirt Day a statutory holiday for all Manitobans, but now she flip-flops. It's clear the Premier doesn't truly support Orange Shirt Day and what it means for Manitobans. She was only trying to avoid making headlines again, and that's disappointing and, quite frankly, disrespectful. Will the Premier apologize to Manitobans for misleading them on making Orange Shirt Day a statutory holiday?
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Reconciliation and Northern Relations.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I want to go on to say, as I started, to recognize the people of Manitoba, students all across Manitoba, as well as the educators who are working with them, businesses, and even other individual organizations that are working hard to promote reconciliation within their communities and within their own groups. There is a lot that has changed in the last 2 to 3 years across our province. Reconciliation is not just a word, it's something that is being lived by all communities. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Kuwait-Nook on a final supplementary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. But not all Manitobans will have that opportunity because it is not a statutory holiday here in Manitoba. The Premier claims that Indigenous communities still do not know what they want, and she still wants to hear from them. Madam Speaker, SCO representing 34 nations, MKO representing 26 nations, and AMC representing 62 nations have all expressed loud and clear the need for making Orange Shirt Day a stat holiday here in Manitoba. Madam Speaker, I will table their statements on this fact following the Premier's announcement that the status quo will remain. When will the Premier stop misleading Manitobans, and will she pass Bill 203 and make Orange Shirt Day a statutory holiday here in Manitoba today?
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Reconciliation and Northern Relations.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm not sure why the member opposite wants to have one day only recognized as Orange Shirt Day on a day of reconciliation. There are people throughout our province that are doing not only events, but showing reconciliation in so many different ways. And I want to give a big shout out to some of the groups from Treaty 1 that are hosting an all-nations event this weekend in Portage La Prairie. My grandsons and friends of theirs who are not Indigenous have been invited by Long Plain for the last number of years to play hockey with them because they play regular season in their community. Our children and others
The member's time has expired. The Honourable Member for St. Boniface.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. 2 doctors working at the sleep clinic quit the Diagnostic Wait Times Task Force because the plan they offered to eliminate the backlog in our public health system was ignored. The PC Task Force then checked with a for-profit clinic that doesn't actually provide treatment to see what they thought of the plan. that there's a pattern here. In the last few months, we've talked about MRI waits that last months, rural ER closures due to lack of lab technicians. The people who perform these diagnostic tests are represented by the Manitoba Association of Healthcare Professionals, people who haven't had a raise for years despite their essential work during the pandemic. Can the Premier explain why MAHCP, which represents the people who perform diagnostic tests in our public system, were excluded from the Surgical and Diagnostic Wait Times Task Force?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Madam Speaker, I want to begin by just thanking the Diagnostic and Surgical Recovery Task Force led by David Mateer. Dr. Ed Bushell plays a pivotal role in the work of that task force, as well as Dr. Peter McDonald. They were out today giving Manitobans a public update of the great work that they are doing, Madam Speaker. The member for St. Boniface talks about diagnostic tests. Well, I'm pleased that 89,378 MRIs have been done, 268,849 CT scans, and that's just not numbers, Madam Speaker. That represents Manitobans receiving care.
The Honourable Member for St. Boniface on a supplementary question.
Madam Speaker, we're seeing the public system being ignored in favour of private providers. In Manitoba, we've just gone through 7 years of hard right, scorched earth conservatism and cuts. There's nothing progressive about it. There's nothing moderate about it. It's pure ideology. In the government's own 2019 fiscal update, which I table, they cut and clawed back to over $250 million of the healthcare budget in a single year. And we're seeing the results in human suffering. It's not pretty. The reason we have a public healthcare system isn't ideology, it's because it works. When new life-saving cures come along, most people can't pay for them, though anyone can get sick, and you shouldn't have to die because you're in a lower income bracket. If the Premier set on defunding our public healthcare system and handing it to business instead, why won't you be upfront about it before the election? Sorry.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Madam Speaker, it's unfortunate that the member for St. Boniface does not care about the 22,335 additional Manitoba patients that have received their procedures through the work of the task force and their requests for service agreement. Madam Speaker, I will say that these Manitobans would not be receiving care if it was up to the member for St. Boniface, Madam Speaker. So I congratulate once again the task force, the steering committee, and all the individuals within the health system that have participated, provided their input into the great work that is being done.
The Honourable Member for River Heights.
Madam Speaker, lung cancer is one of the deadliest of all cancers, with a 5-year survival rate of just under 25%. And with about 700 Manitobans dying each year. While much focus is on smoking, the second common reason for lung cancer is exposure to radon. Each year, more than 100 Manitobans die from lung cancer caused by radon. That's more deaths than from all motor vehicle accidents in the province. These deaths are preventable with strong public health measures. But for decades, NDP and PC governments have failed to act. When will the current government implement the measures needed to prevent Manitobans from being exposed to high levels of radon gas?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Climate.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank our staff in Environment and Climate who work diligently to ensure the safety of all residents across the province for toxic gases and other items that are harmful to our environment. Radon does create issues in other parts of the province. It's not equally shared across the province, and we do have guidelines and testing measures in place to protect all Manitobans, and we will continue to make sure that the Manitobans that we serve are safe at their home and in their business.
The Honourable Member for Brandon East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The arts, culture and sports sectors here in Manitoba are highly supported by both our Premier and our government. Recently, our government announced $50 million in funding for over 402 projects that foster community, creativity and innovation in local arts, culture and sports, can the minister please explain the avenues in which he is making it more accessible for Manitoba to apply for this great funding? Wow. Good.
The Honourable Minister for Sport, Culture and Heritage.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to thank the member for Brandon East for that great question. Madam Speaker, our government is continuing to find ways to support the ever so essential arts, culture, and sports in Manitoba. Madam Speaker, for 17 years, the NDP did nothing to support arts, culture, and sports in this province. I am so happy to announce that we have extended the deadline for small capital and special initiatives to April 24th and large capital stream to May 1st. I encourage all Manitobans to reach out and apply for this great program. They can reach my department by calling 1-866-626-4862. We are here for you. On this side of the House, we are going to work to support arts, culture, and sports, not like the NDP who did nothing.
The Honourable Member for Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My colleagues and I from the North have been raising concerns about the lack of access to health care in our northern communities throughout this legislative session and for years before that. Patients in the North needing sleep testing are being forced to travel down to Winnipeg or Brandon to access equipment and supplies. Even this PC's privatization plan leaves Northerns out. Will the member stand up and answer the question, why are they continuing to leave Northerns out of their privatization healthcare plan?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to rise to talk about our investments in the public health system in the North. I'm not sure what the member is referring to, but Madam Speaker, $812 million has been invested into northern and rural health. A significant portion of these monies will be used in the creation of a new intermediate healthcare hub in northern Manitoba. And we are so excited, Madam Speaker, to be working with our northern partners to reduce the need for individuals in the north to travel to southern regions or here to Winnipeg, Madam Speaker. And I invite the member to join in the discussions that I will be having with many First Nations and Indigenous groups and stakeholders in the next few months.
And I have a ruling for the House. Oh, time for oral questions has expired, and I have a ruling for the House. Prior to routine proceedings on Monday, April 3rd, 2023, the Honourable Member for Union Station raised a matter of privilege contending that the Honourable Minister of Health had deliberately misled the House by saying that the NDP had paid nurses to resign from the Sexual Assault Nurse Examiner program. The Honourable Member concluded by moving, and I quote, that this House condemn the Minister of Health for deliberately misleading the Legislature and that this matter be immediately referred to a permanent standing committee of this House for investigation, end quote. The Honourable Government House Leader and the Honourable Member for River Heights also offered contributions to the Chair. The Deputy Speaker took the matter under advisement in order to consult the procedural authorities. There are two conditions that must be satisfied in order for a matter raised to be ruled in order as a prima facie case of privilege. Was the issue raised at the earliest opportunity, and was sufficient evidence provided to support the member's claim that their privileges or the privileges of the House were breached? On the first issue of whether the issue was raised at the earliest opportunity, the honourable member indicated that they were raising the issue at the earliest opportunity, and I accept the word of the honourable member. On the second issue, whether sufficient evidence was provided, there are a number of considerations to explore, particularly with regard to charges of deliberately misleading the House. When bringing forward an allegation of deliberately misleading the House, there is an onus of providing intent to deliberately mislead. It is not sufficient to state that a member has deliberately misled the House. There is also a need to demonstrate the proof of intent to mislead. This is a standard that Manitoba Speakers Rocan, Daquet, Hicks, Reid, and the current Speaker have maintained. As Speaker Rocan ruled in 1991, a member must support their charge with proof of intent. Speaker Daquet ruled that without a member admitting in the House that they had the stated goal of misleading the House when putting remarks on the record, it is virtually impossible to prove that a member had deliberately intended to mislead the House. Speakers Hicks and Reid made similar findings in rulings, as has the current Speaker. Similarly, the House of Commons Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs, in its 50th report, reiterated that when it is alleged that a member is in contempt for deliberately misleading the House, the statement must in fact have been misleading, and it must be established what the member making the statement knew at the time, and that the statement was made, that it was incorrect, and that in making the statement, the member intended to mislead the House. The committee went on to state, and I quote, "Intent is always a difficult element to establish in the absence of an admission or confession," end quote. Joseph Mango, in the second edition of Parliamentary Privilege in Canada, advises on page 241 that, and I quote, "To allege that a member has misled the House is a matter of order rather than privilege," end quote. He goes on to advise on the same page, and I quote, "To allege that a member has deliberately misled the House is also a matter of order," end quote. The difficulty also facing the presiding officer in this situation is that the words complained of do not appear in Hansard. It does not mean the words were not said. However, if the words do not appear in Hansard, the Speaker really does not have the scope to make a ruling about the language used. For all of these reasons, I must respectfully rule that a prima facie case of privilege has not been demonstrated. Although I was not able to rule that a prima facie case of privilege was demonstrated, I would like to take this opportunity to address some of the actions that have taken place in the Chamber over the past number of months. I am well aware that there is a provincial general election scheduled to take place in October, and perhaps due to this fact, rhetoric and accusations on both sides of the House have been ramping up. Politics can be a tough and demanding profession at times. However, we all need to be mindful that we have the watching public and the media who observe what we do and say in this chamber. We are the center of democracy in this province, and the health of our democracy is judged by what the public observes here. Whether correctly or not, it provides the opportunity for those outside this chamber to form opinions of politicians and what goes on in this chamber. Sadly, we are reaching a place where there is a loss of public confidence in governments at all levels and in democratic institutions. We must be more vigilant and aware that some of the actions taken in this House may be viewed in the eyes of the watching public as going too far, which can tarnish the image of our institution and the esteem by which we are all held. I am challenging all of us to do better when it comes to respectfully disagreeing, and that would include being careful about making allegations attributing motives, such as when heckling. Petitions. The Honourable Member for River Heights.
Madam Speaker, I wish to present the following petition to the Legislative Assembly. The background to this petition is as follows. Since the takeover of Afghanistan by the Taliban in August of 2021, Afghan citizens and their families have been subjected to persecution and human rights atrocities because of their faith, gender, and former association with organizations thought to be friendly with the previous government and its allies. This abuse has taken the form of public assaults, kidnappings, and killings. Many Afghans who have left or are attempting to leave Afghanistan to find safe refuge in neighboring countries. This undertaking is difficult due to the Taliban's activities and their presence in countries like Pakistan. Many Afghans who are looking to leave Afghanistan and come to Canada are educated and experienced, and as such would prove to be valuable assets to Manitoba, considering its current labor shortage and challenges to its economy. Educated Afghans have usually studied for 4 to 6 years in a specific field of study and spent a significant amount of time and money for that education. However, these people still face barriers to obtaining employment in their field of expertise, as Canada has very strict rules regarding the use of that education and experience. Many Afghans are refugees in other countries and are currently jobless, which is an added barrier for them under the current criteria of the provincial nominee program. Some Afghan newcomers who face literacy issues because they came from a non-developed country would benefit from an in-depth informational course to assist them with acclimation into Canadian lifestyles. The Interim Federal Health Program provides limited temporary coverage of health care benefits to refugees who aren't eligible for provincial or territorial health insurance. However, the refugee must apply for discretionary coverage and provide a list of compelling personal circumstances in order to qualify for an urgent medical circumstances, like urgent root canals, unanticipated life-threatening and emergency medical conditions. We petition the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba as follows: to urge the provincial government to work with the federal government to prioritize the evacuation of the immediate and extended family of Afghans who now call Canada home, and to facilitate their coming to Manitoba, including helping Afghan refugees in other countries such as Pakistan. To urge the provincial government to expand the Manitoba Provincial Nominee Program and reevaluate the accreditation of education and jobs to ensure all immigrants and refugees can utilize their skills more easily and readily in Manitoba for work. To urge the provincial government to have fewer rigid criteria for Afghans under the provincial nominee program, and having a connection to Manitoba family members or friends should be a key criteria. To urge the provincial government to enhance adequate acclimation services for newcomers through community-based support programs and increase their health coverage to meet their urgent health care necessities. Signed by Ismail Azadi, Abdullah Abzadi, Amina Ahmadi, and many, many others.
In accordance with our Rule 133, bracket 6, when petitions are read, they are deemed to be received by the House. The Honourable Member for the Pas-Camissac.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wish to present the following petition to the Legislative Assembly. The background to this petition is as follows. Number 1, Provincial Road number 224 serves Peguis First Nation, Fisher River Cree Nation, and surrounding communities. The road is in need of substantial repairs. Number 2, the road has been in poor condition for years and has numerous potholes, uneven driving surfaces, and extremely narrow shoulders. Number 3, due to recent population growth in the area, there has been increased vehicle and pedestrian use of Provincial Road 224. Without repair, number 4, without repair, Provincial Road 224 will continue to pose a hazard to the many Manitobans who use it on a regular basis. Number 5, concerned Manitobans are requesting that Provincial Road 224 be assessed and repaired urgently to improve safety for its users. We petition the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba as follows: to urge the Minister of Infrastructure to complete an assessment of Provincial Road 224 and implement the appropriate repairs using public funds as quickly as possible. Madam Speaker, this petition has been signed by many, many fine Manitobans.
The Honourable Member for Elmwood.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wish to present the following petition to the Legislative Assembly. The background of this petition is as follows. Number 1, cities across Canada and the United States, including Chicago, Washington, D.C., and Salinas, California, and Orillia, Ontario, are offering home security rebate programs that enhance public safety and allow for more efficient use of their policing resources. Number 2, home security surveillance systems protect homes and businesses by potentially deterring burglaries. Number 3, whole neighborhoods benefit when more homes and businesses have these security systems. Number 4, a 2022 Angus Reid Institute poll found 70% of Winnipeggers surveyed believed crime had increased over the past 5 years, the highest percentage found among cities in Canada. Number 5, the same survey reported half of Winnipeggers polled do not feel safe walking alone at night, and almost 20% of them said they were a victim of police-reported crime in the last 2 years. Number 6, although the public understands what the criminologists and community advocates point to as the main drivers of crime, namely the larger issues of lack of food, addictions, and poverty, they support rebate programs like these as they help the most vulnerable in our community by removing financial barriers for personal protection. We petition the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba as follows: to urge the provincial government to work with municipalities to establish a province-wide tax rebate or other incentive program to encourage residents and businesses to purchase approved home and business security protection systems. This petition is signed by many, many Manitobans.
Grievances. Orders of the day, government business. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker. I have a series of committee announcements to make, so I'll start with them now. I'd like to announce that the Standing Committee on the Legislative Affairs will meet on Monday, April 24th, 2023 at 6 p.m. to consider the following: Bill number 2, the Official Time Amendment Act; Bill number 8, the Off-Road Trail Safety and Maintenance Act; Bill 13, the Wildlife Amendment Act; and Bill 24, the Wildfires Amendment Act.
It has been announced that the Standing Committee on Legislative Affairs will meet on Monday, April 24th, 2023 at 6 p.m. to consider the following: Bill 2, the Official Time Amendment Act; Bill 8, the Off-Road Trail Safety and Maintenance Act; Bill 13, the Wildlife Amendment Act; Bill 24, the Wildfires Amendment Act. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd also like to announce that the Standing Committee on Social and Economic Development will meet on Monday, April 24th, 2023, and if necessary, on Tuesday, April 25th, 2023, and Wednesday, April 26th, 2023 at 6 p.m. to consider Bill number 35, the Education Administration Amendment Act, Teacher Certification and Professional Conduct.
It has been announced that the Standing Committee on Social and Economic Development will meet on Monday, April 24th, 2023, and if necessary, on Tuesday, April 25th, 2023, and on Wednesday, April 26th, 2023 at 6 p.m. to consider Bill number 35, the Education Administration Amendment Act, Teacher Certification and Professional Conduct. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you again, Madam Speaker. I'd like to also announce that the Standing Committee on Justice will meet on Tuesday, April 25th, 2023 at 6 p.m. to consider the following: Bill number 6, the Manitoba Public Insurance Corporation Amendment Act; Bill number 12, the Minor Amendments in Corrections Act 2023; Bill 15, the Court of King's Bench Amendment Act; Bill 18, the Legislative Security Amendment Act; and Bill number 19, the Provincial Offences Amendment Act.
It has been announced that the Standing Committee on Justice will meet on Tuesday, April 25th, 2023 at 6 p.m. to consider the following: Bill 6, the Manitoba Public Insurance Corporation Amendment Act; Bill 12, the Minor Amendments and Corrections Act 2023; Bill 15, the Court of King's Bench Amendment Act; Bill 18, the Legislative Security Amendment Act; and Bill 19, the Provincial Offences Amendment Act. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And finally, I'd like to announce that the Standing Committee on Justice will meet on Wednesday, April 26, 2023 at 6 p.m. to consider the following: Bill number 11, the Reducing Red Tape and Improving Services Act 2023; Bill number 17, the Regulated Health Professions Amendment Act 2; Bill number 26, the Limitations Amendment and Public Officers Amendment Act; And Bill number 34, the Police Services Amendment Act.
It has been announced that the Standing Committee on Justice will meet on Wednesday, April 26, 2023 at 6 p.m. to consider the following. Bill 11, the Reducing Red Tape and Improving Services Act 2023. Bill 17, the Regulated Health Professions Amendment Act 2. Bill 26, the Limitations Amendment and Public Officers Amendment Act. And Bill 34, the Police Services Amendment Act. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Madam Speaker, could we please resolve into Committee of Supply?
It has been announced that the House will consider estimates this afternoon. This House will now resolve into Committee of Supply. Mr. Deputy Speaker, please take the chair.
Jimmy's been here for 100 years and he still looks like a kid.
Where's that catalytic converter question? I've been waiting for like 17 months.
We haven't had one catalytic converter question the whole session.
Oh, it was just catalytic converter. Nothing was going to help. It's never going to get better. Now you don't ask the question.
You know, and we haven't had a Louisa Bridge question, Cadillac converter. She says don't. That's practice here.
Wow, that was a pretty synchronized bow.
For Sir Richard, didn't know the end. Here.
I don't even know. A range of thoughts come to mind, but probably best to.
I don't think I have any. So. So it's interesting when I was looking at our
Will the Committee of Supply please come to order? This section of the Committee of Supply will now resume consideration of the estimates for the Department of Economic Development, Investment and Trade. At this time, we invite ministerial and opposition staff to enter the chamber. Could the Minister and critic please introduce their staff in attendance? The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and happy to have today with me my Deputy Minister, Jaron Villel. I also have my Assistant Deputy Minister of Finance and Corporate Services, Melissa Valentine, and Assistant Deputy Minister, Workforce and Industry Program Partnerships, Michelle Wallace, and my Chief of Staff, Eric Selch, is joining us here today, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Minister. And there's no staff for the critics, so we'll just keep moving along as previously stated in accordance with Sub-Rule 78, subsection 16. During the consideration of departmental estimates, questioning for each department shall proceed in a global manner. The floor is now open for questions. The honourable member for Fort Garry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On February 8th, 2018, the Minister's government issued a request for information on a venture capital fund proposal. As the Minister is well aware, on April 29th, 2022, that fund was established with initial investment of $50 million venture fund. I'm wondering if the Minister can explain how many proposals they received after February 8, 2018, and what proposal was successful and why it took 4 years to get the venture fund established.
Honourable Minister.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I certainly would like to thank the member for pivoting to this new venture capital fund, which is such an important part of growing our economy right here in Manitoba, and I'm sure the member from Fort Garry would agree. And some of the success I wanted to point out, just the initial successes that we've seen already and the interest. As the member knows, Manitoba for decades has not had a venture capital fund, and capital for businesses not only to start and come to Manitoba, but to actually grow and expand right here in Manitoba. So our government, under the Premier's leadership, is extremely excited about the excitement that this has generated. As a matter of fact, the first $50 million that was announced in 2022 has already raised in excess of about $150 million in capital coming to Manitoba. And with that excitement, we, under the Premier's leadership, we moved to an additional $50 million, turning that VENCAP into a total of $100 million. And we're certainly very optimistic that that will continue to grow. And again, Manitoba is open for business, and $100 million in capital ready to go in partnership with credit unions is going to be a very exciting time. And I offer the member to stay tuned and watch as this grows.
The honourable member for Fort Garry.
So I'd just like to remind the minister, the question was why it took 4 years from conception to actually founding the venture fund. What was the reason for the delay? Also, I'm wondering if the minister can advise how it was the board selected and who was responsible for making the board selections. I can say parenthetically that none of the board members have venture capital experience, so I'm wondering why the minister selected people who were, quite frankly, not qualified to be on a venture capital fund.
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you again, Mr. Chair, and certainly want to be able to get on the record some facts. It's unfortunate that the tone from the member from Fort Garry refers to a board selection and folks not being qualified. I will get into that and share with the member the qualified folks that are on this board, this very exciting venture capital fund that's going to change Manitoba and grow Manitoba faster than any other economy, in our opinion, and it's the opinion of the board and the investors as well. So first of all, I'll touch on the question of why, in his opinion, it took so long. Well, I can tell the member that when this was first, when the Premier first led this charge, we were going into a COVID pandemic, of course, as the member knows. So all governments, not only in Manitoba and the City of Winnipeg and the nation of Canada and the USA and across the world, had to pivot and ensure that they protected their citizens, and that's exactly what our Manitoba government did for almost 24 months of a pandemic. Once coming out of the pandemic, we again moved right back into our moving forward with building a venture capital fund that would help grow our economy. The Premier, of course, led by the Premier, and understanding that economic growth, not taxes, actually grows the economy. I know the member opposite and the Leader of the Opposition favor tax increases, but on this side of the House, we favor economic development and growth, and that is done by the private sector and enticing and inviting folks to come invest right here in Manitoba, and that's exactly what VenCap does. With respect to the member from Fort Garry's comments on not qualified, I would like to read into the record, Mr. Chair, if I may, the members that are currently working on the VenCap board, and I'll read them into the record now. Mike Pyle, and also his resume as well, I'll read them all in, led two businesses that started as small businesses, Arctic Glacier Group, I'm sure the members heard, and scaled to several hundreds of millions of dollars, Mr. Chair. Steve Croft have grown many businesses. GAMI, Payworks International, and Marshall Ring, head of Technology Accelerator, and Ray Bouchard, angel investor in a number of prominent businesses. Also the chairman, Mike Pyle, Exchange Income, grew businesses to a current valuation of about $2.3 billion, based right here in Manitoba, Mr. Chair. So certainly these are folks that have a history of growing not only their own businesses, but also working with other companies to grow and inviting businesses to come and settle in Manitoba. So I challenged the member on why he would even suggest that these folks that I put on the record, which he can read back tomorrow in his leisure, and challenge him why he would think that these folks are not qualified. We know the excitement that's already been raised by the initial $50 million, as I put on the record earlier, to the tune of $150 million of private capital raised by the first 50, and we're really excited about the next $50 million too as well, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Fort Garry.
Well, the Minister's answer about the 4-year delay is deeply disappointing, and especially trying to blame COVID when the initiative started in 2018, 2 years prior to the pandemic even hitting. So that's certainly unconvincing. I'm glad he read in the bios of the board members, because it certainly highlights the point I'm trying to make. Not one of those individuals, although they may be exceptional business people and they may be qualified in the business field, not one of them has ever sat on a venture capital fund, nor have they had the experience to do so. So I'm very interested in how they were selected to sit on Manitoba's first board. And the minister neglected to answer the question of who actually was making the selections for board members. Was that the minister directly? Was it cabinet? Who is responsible for these individuals? Now, my friend brought up the chair of the board being Michael Pyle. Very interesting. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Exchange Income Corporation. Gary Filman, who's the previous PC Premier and is actually on the board, or was on the board, of Exchange Income Corporation, was receiving over $200,000 a year in compensation from that company. And interestingly enough, his son, David Philman, is legal counsel for Exchange Income Corporation. So I'm wondering if you can explain whether Mr. Pyle's connection to PC Party grandees influenced his selection as chair of the board, given that he has no experience in venture capital.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, to endeavour, as I said to the member last time we were in the chamber about ensuring that we get the answers, and we do, and we will, and we have. So I'm prepared to share it now with the member. But before I do that, I just wanted to touch on the member's comments with respect to Mr. Gary Filmon. And first of all, for the record, I'd like to again thank Mr. Filmon, the Honourable Gary Filmon, and also Her Honour, the former LG, Janice Filmon as well, for their dedicated service to this great province. I can tell you that, and I'm sure the member would agree, that these folks have done so much to improve the lives for Manitobans in Winnipeg and across this great province, and I wanted to ensure that that is on the record. And certainly we appreciate the work that not only His Honour but Her Honour has done too as well. But further to that, and before I get into the selection of the board, I'd also like to just put on the record too as well that the member mentioned conflicts of interest. Well, it's interesting that the member brings that up today when his leader decided that he wanted to hold Bill 20 because he didn't want Manitobans to know what secrets that the member from Fort Garry and potentially the leader of the opposition, the member from Fort Rouge, have. So it's interesting that he brings up conflict of interest, and I hope that maybe he speaks to his colleague and says, you know what, I think we better bring that bill back, because that's exactly what Jeffrey Schnoor asked for, and that's exactly what our government under the leadership of our Premier delivered, and shame on the NDP for holding Bill 20, the Conflict of Interest Act. So we'll jump now into the other question. The Business Council selected Mike Pyle and Steve Croft, and also the Business Council of Manitoba appointed Mike as the chair. The Manitoba Technology Accelerator chose Marshall Ring, and the Manitoba government chose Barb Gammy and Ray Bouchard to that board as well, totaling 5 members. And again, these are Manitobans that have made huge impacts on the lives of Manitobans as well, and not only in their personal life, but in their business lives. And they've also all worked in other jurisdictions on VENCAPs throughout not only Canada, but I suspect in other jurisdictions as well. So I welcome them. I commend them for the work they're doing, and I look forward to them continuing to help grow Manitoba's economy under the leadership of our Premier.
The Honourable Member for Fort Garry.
I just want to remind the Minister that the Ethics Commissioner wanted a much stronger bill, and this government refused to bring it in. And there's an ongoing discussion about blind trusts and whether or not they should even exist in Manitoba. Now, so I'm wondering if the Minister can tell us what is the compensation scheme for the board? How much are the board members paid a year to be on there? We also know, and he can confirm, that there was no investments made in 2022. How much money out of that initial $50 million was dispersed on administrative and other costs, given that there was actually no investments in 2022?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Chair, and appreciate the opportunity again to advise the member that. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now? Got me? Okay. That the members of the board are and continue to be. They are fully volunteers. Actually, the fund is autonomous, so essentially, as we move forward and build out this great opportunity for Manitoba businesses and businesses coming outside into Manitoba, I asked the member to stay tuned, and certainly we would report back once the establishment of remuneration has been decided on. But I thank the members again, Mr. Chair, for their volunteer time in order to move Manitoba forward in a positive and economic growth way. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The Honourable Member for Fort Garry.
So my understanding is that David Philman, a lawyer and partner at MLT Aikens, is been appointed as counsel for the Venture Fund. Of course, this is former PC Premier Gary Philman's son. Also, he is active representing Exchange Income Corporation. That's the business that Board Chair Michael Pyle is also the CEO of. I'm wondering if the minister can advise how he was selected as counsel and by whom, and was there a tendering process so that other lawyers and law firms could have applied for this, or was it basically just an appointment? Pardon me? Moonlighting. Oh, okay.
Member for Fort Garry has the floor.
Oh, I do. Okay. So I'm very curious. The minister is chomping at the bit to give me all this information and be transparent with Manitobans. So let's tune in. Yeah.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know the member and, well, particularly the NDP like to control things. Well, on this side of the House, we don't. We help, we enable, we help things, we move forward, we assist with government assists people to get started. We do all those great things, but then we get out of the way. And this is another example of this being an independent board from government. And in this particular case, again, as in many cases across our government, the board has full autonomy to make decisions, and they do, again, independent of government. So whether that's being where they want to hold an office or hire an accountant or hire a legal firm, then they have the full autonomy to do that. It's much like independent municipal governments versus provincial versus federal. Everybody has a role to play, and we try not to step in each other's sandboxes. Other than, of course, we know the member from Fort Garry likes to do that, but we simply don't, and we trust that once we put the tools in place, that these independent boards, independent of government, have all the tools to make the decisions to ensure that they're growing our economy and continue to move forward for the betterment of all Manitobans.
The honourable member for Fort Garry.
I want to thank the minister. I really appreciate that sort of honest, forthright, look people in the eye answer. And it's clear this government has no oversight of this entity. It's very similar to the mess that they've made in MPI and have allowed things to fester, and I think we're starting to see problems at this venture fund. So I'm wondering if the minister, in the spirit of his forthrightness and honesty, can advise how much David Philman received in legal fees in the year 2022 for this venture fund, given the fact that it had 0 business transactions during that year. How many millions went to MLT Aikens?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And incremental to the $50 million, original $50 million VENCAP fund, we provided administrative funding to support the establishment of the overall fund in the beginning to the tune of about $350K to support Manitoba Technology Accelerator. So MTA, incremental to the $50 million, had the 350 approximately to get started. So again, being independent of government and certainly their responsibility on how they deem to best implement that into the overall development of the fund.
The Honourable Member for Fort Garry.
Okay, so I don't want to misunderstand the minister. So in 2022, the government gave $350,000 to the board to administer the fund, and that $50 million, I assume he can confirm, was still in place and it hadn't been touched because there was no transactions in 2022, and I assume that $350,000 is all gone from 2022.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and apologize to the member from Fort Garry for the delay. A bit of a tickle in my throat there. I'm going to take the member on just a bit of a journey here for a minute. Take him back to when I first started my business. Oh man, I'm going to date myself a little bit. 1988. When I first started my business. I know you run your own business too, the member from Fort Garry, so you probably can relate to this story, but I'll make it quick because I do have an answer for you, but this really ties into it. And let me share it with you. So back in 1888, whew, I'm old. 1988, my wife and I started our business, and we needed some capital. We needed to get started. We needed to buy office furniture. We needed to get phone service. I think we just had the internet coming. I had a new computer I played solitaire on because it was so long ago. It's the only thing we knew what to do on our computers at the time, right? Microsoft came up with, remember? Yeah, anyways, it was a lot of fun, but we learned how to use the computer. So what we didn't have was capital. So we borrowed capital from family and friends, and they all helped us out, but we had about $50,000 to get started, to get all that necessary resources and infrastructure in place so that we could go out and sell our business and get customers and make money, put food on our table for my two daughters. And we did. But my story to this is $350,000 was invested to establish a brand new organization. So this was a brand new company back in '89, and we're starting a business. We needed to invest in it to get it going. So I commend the members, particularly from MTA, for taking the time and using the investment, and again, $350K, to get started and build this fund and build the overall program to where we are today. I call that an ROI to remember, because that return on investment is going to pay dividends for Manitobans for years and generations to come, based on that $350K. So I thank the member for indulging me, and I will talk a little bit more about my business and how we got through that too as well, if it gives me an opportunity, because there's so many synergies between what we're doing here in Manitoba and growing our economy to what my wife and I did to build our business back in the early 1990s. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The honourable member for Fort Garry.
So I wonder if the minister can break out of that $350,000, how much of that went to David Philman, son of Gary Philman, in fees. Now, the other question I have related to this, obviously this government announced a further $50 million in this year's budget, and announced the first and only transaction that occurred to a company called Westcap Management Limited, where the principal was a man by the name of Grant Kook, K-O-O-K. He was given $25 million of that money to create a venture capital fund based out of Saskatchewan for Manitoba businesses. So I'm wondering if you can answer how much David Philman profited from this venture fund in 2022, and why is a Manitoba venture capital fund being administered out of Saskatoon instead of Manitoba?
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And just first of all, answer the first question. Again, government is independent of the board, and decisions involving the day-to-day operations are the decisions of the board, not government. And number two, mentioning WestCap, as a matter of fact, WestCap also sees the opportunity that is now here in Manitoba for decades. It wasn't, it is now, and it will continue to be. So WestCap is basically the fund manager, and also WestCap will be settling in Manitoba full time, actually opening up an office here. But I can assure the member that the fund manager is working with Manitoba-led credit unions right here in Manitoba, Access, Sunrise credit unions, where again are supplying the capital here in Manitoba to build Manitoba businesses. So certainly WestCap's involvement as fund manager is great for us to get this fund going and really help generate excitement. But we're really pleased that the Manitoba credit unions have stepped up, Access and Sunrise, and are there at the table. As a matter of fact, when I was there with the Premier making the announcement of the additional $50 million, I had the opportunity to meet with the CEO of Access and Sunrise, and the excitement that they shared with us was incredible. They said they've been waiting 20 years for this, and now it's here in Manitoba, and they're looking forward to partnering and growing Manitoba businesses, and also getting businesses to settle right here in Manitoba.
The Honourable Member for Fort Garry.
Thank you. So this board administers a full quarter of their fund to an out-of-province fund manager, and the minister has no oversight at all in this transaction. I'm wondering if the minister confirmed that he was not even consulted or signed off, and learned through the media that this transaction had occurred, or if I'm wrong about that, if he can put on the record that he was consulted and had this information before this transaction, a quarter of the fund was dispersed.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, to answer the member from Fort Garry's question, as I mentioned earlier in a couple of my responses, government enables and sets the environment and essentially sets the stage. But once government sets that tone, then we hand it off to the professionals. We rely, of course, on the business experts who are independent of government. Essentially, once we set that stage, we get out of the way and let business do what they do, and let stakeholders do what they do, and let industry does what it does. Certainly, they have the expertise, not government. And I know the member from Fort Garry should understand that government needs to get out of the way sometimes, but we certainly set the stage. And again, all funds will be invested right here in Manitoba, as I mentioned earlier. Certainly happy to provide more information for the member as well. And again, with the full support of Access and Sunrise Credit Unions that are Manitoba-based credit unions here in Manitoba. And I'll tell the member a story about credit unions if we get another opportunity to, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Fort Garry.
Again, my question to the minister was, when did he learn of this transaction of Westcap Management Group in relation to the government announcement? Like, are we talking about a day before or a week? How much time did he know as the minister before it actually went to the public? And the other sort of issue here that I'm hoping the minister can answer is that when I speak to startup companies, they tell me that the reason why Manitoba needs a Manitoba Venture Fund, because there is tons of venture capital out there, including operating in Manitoba. The problem is if it's based in Calgary or, say, in this case in Saskatoon, they offer business development services and advice and mentoring. And what often happens with a Manitoba company is that the venture capital fund eventually says, hey, you know what? Why don't you move to Calgary, because we need to be closer to you. And they in fact move. And I met an individual who had a startup company 2 days ago at the IBAM breakfast. And after 2 years in Manitoba, he moved his company to Edmonton for exactly that reason, because the venture fund was headquartered there and they insisted on it. So why would this government create a Made for Manitoba venture fund that actually isn't in Manitoba?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to go back to the member citing a small firm moving to Edmonton, and I would welcome the member to either table that information or share that with me and the department. Certainly, I would like to understand a little bit more about this particular situation. Obviously, any business that leaves Manitoba is disturbing. I'm sure not only for you, but I know it is for me and our team as well. So I certainly appreciate the example. If you could provide some information, even some contact information, maybe we can enlighten this firm and their ownership to again look at Manitoba, particularly the Manitoba Fund that we're talking about today. And again, you can just either come see me or just send me an email, and I'll certainly look forward to getting that information. When the announcement was done by the Premier, which I was honored to host and chair, was done in the eventual office. It'll be opening up later this spring and year. Again, it could be late spring, early summer. We've had this discussion before, but based on the weather outside, we're not sure when spring is coming and whether summer will just come. So, but you can look forward to that office opening. Westcap is the fund manager, as we talked about earlier, and again, that office will be staffed by senior leadership. And again, the member should know, and a good takeaway is, again, Westcap must set up an office here in Manitoba as part of their requirement. So the office is being built as we speak, and I know that when it is open, I certainly invite the member to join me, and we'll do a tour, and certainly he can get as excited as I am about the opportunity for Manitoba and Manitoba businesses to take advantage of this new venture.
The Honourable Member for Fort Garry.
And again, I don't want the minister to miss the forest from the trees. The issue is keeping Manitoba businesses in Manitoba and not having these venture funds actually pull business out of Manitoba, which has historically been the case. But I have a question for the minister. Now, I'm wondering, was he aware that David Philman also represents Westcap Management Limited, and that Grant Kook is one of his clients? So what's effectively happening here is he's getting taxpayer money for the legal fees for representing the Manitoba Venture Fund. He is now contracted with one of his clients and is getting legal fees and Manitoba taxpayer money from that end of the deal. He's doing great in this venture capital fund, and given that it's been 5 years to set up, he seems to be the only one that's actually making any money out of this deal. So I'm wondering if the minister was aware of this, what it seems is a concerning conflict that needs to be investigated, and whether or not there are any ethical or moral standards that, or any oversight at all, it appears, of this organization where you have the principal lawyer acting for all parties to the transaction. Would the minister care to comment?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And well, the member opposite and the leader of the opposition spent years driving docs and other professionals out of this province with unreal tax hikes on regular, everyday, hardworking Manitobans. We're focused on building the economy, and that's what we'll continue to do. And again, to the member's question, this venture is separate. It's independent of government. What the decisions that are made at that table are made at that table, not by government.
The Honourable Member for Fort Garry.
Is the minister at all alarmed or concerned that there is a lawyer that is representing both sides of the deal receiving taxpayer dollars from Manitoba, and there doesn't seem to be any oversight or even concern from this minister that this is going on?
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And certainly the individual or the legal firm that the member is referencing doesn't work for the province or doesn't work for the Manitoba government, Mr. Chair. I suggest that maybe the member himself has probably done more work as a lawyer for the government than the member, the colleague or the legal firm that he's referring to. So that would be a no.
The Honourable Member for Fort Garry.
Grant Cook has been widely reported as having close ties to the Saskatchewan Party in Saskatchewan and is very close to the Conservative ruling government there. Obviously, the Filmon name in Manitoba is synonymous with the PC Party. So I'm wondering if the minister can tell me what role did political partisanship have in who's involved in this scheme. It seems that every single person who is involved with this venture fund is a member in good standing of the Conservative Party of Manitoba or Saskatchewan.
The Honourable Minister.
Is the member suggesting that the $50 million event cap that raised $150 million was a bad thing for Manitoba?
The Honourable Member for Fort Garry.
Well, it's telling that the minister can't answer the question and he's trying to avoid it. I will give him some more information because it appears there's absolutely no oversight by the province. Grant Cook is a very controversial figure in Saskatchewan. He actually administered a similar venture capital fund for Saskatchewan. Westcap was paid $10.7 million to manage two funds in Saskatchewan. Guess what? He lost $16.4 million in Saskatchewan taxpayer funds. So somebody who has a proven track record of mismanaging taxpayer funds was hired by Manitoba to do the same thing. Can the minister please comment?
The Honourable Minister.
$50 million investment, $150 million return on the first 50.
The Honourable Member for Fort Garry.
Did the minister vet Westcap at all before handing over $25 million of Manitoba taxpayers' money? And did he know, is he listening for the first time and hearing for the first time, that this very company lost over $16 million of Saskatchewan taxpayer money?
The Honourable Minister.
$4.3 billion of Manitoba taxpayer money wasted on a bipole line by the former government, the former NDP government. I will not take any lessons, nor will my hardworking staff at this table from the member from Fort Garry when it comes to losing money for taxpayers in Manitoba.
The honourable member for Fort Garry.
Well, listen, the minister shouldn't hide behind his staff. They are hardworking people and they deserve our respect. This is on the minister, and this is the minister's lack of oversight of this venture fund. So I'll ask the question again. Were any vetting or checks done before $25 million of Manitoba taxpayer dollars was handed over to a company with a history of failure doing the exact same thing?
The honourable minister.
$50 million with an ROI of 150. Can't say much more than that.
The honourable member for Fort Garry.
How much Manitoba money has been paid to Westcap? Not the fund, but actual fees to Westcap. What are we out?
The honourable minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Westcap was hired by Access and Sunrise to be the fund manager.
The honourable member for Fort Garry.
So the province of Saskatchewan has had to inject even more millions of public money into this losing venture capital fund managed by Westcap. I'm wondering if the minister can tell us if there's any safeguards or oversight by this government in relation to the Manitoba Fund, or is any friend of the PC party basically have free range to lose Manitoba taxpayer dollars?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, Manitoba dollars to invest in Manitoba businesses, and again, a reminder to the member, 50 million raised $150 million in capital.
The Honourable Member for Fort Garry.
So the Westcap set up a fund called the Connect Manitoba Growth Fund, and it has a mandate that it will only invest in later stage growth companies that have market acceptance for their product or service. If you get through all the business speak, basically what they're talking about, there's only going to invest in successful, safe bet companies. They won't actually invest in emerging companies. So the government starts a venture capital fund to help startups, and then after 5 years, the only transaction they have, the only fund they create is for safe bet established companies. So after 5 years, your venture capital fund doesn't actually help Manitoba startups. So I'm wondering if the minister can explain the disconnect between the press release and what actually is happening with this fund.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I know I probably don't have a tough time to get through this whole list, but I do want to start with a story, Mr. Chair, and if I run out of time, I'll come back and touch on some of the great work that we're doing to support businesses such as the member had mentioned, other than large corporations coming to Manitoba. But before I do that, I just wanted to share with the member about my credit union story. I mentioned it earlier, and I wanted to share it and get it on the record because it certainly touches on what small and medium-sized businesses went through and continue to go through, and that's why our government recognizes investments that I'm going to put on the record shortly. But before I do that, I just wanted to, again, share the story about when my wife and I were at a time of our business, about 10 years in, where we needed to make a decision. We either stayed where we were or continued to grow. However, the problem with growing, and the member from Fort Garry knows because he runs a small business, and he would understand, when you get to that wall, and you have nowhere to go and you're trying to get over it, you have to figure out a way. And so you're looking for support outside of what you did for the first 10 years. Well, we didn't have it. So what we did was, what we didn't do, what happened was one of our lenders sent us a letter, and within 30 days we were told that we needed to pay back our line of credit to the full amount. And we were calling your line of credit, and essentially you were done. So we said, well, that's great, but what are we supposed to do to make payroll? And they said, well, quite frankly, that's not our concern. We're pulling back on small and medium-sized businesses. We've made a decision corporately, likely out of Toronto or Calgary, and left my wife and I sitting there in our office going, what's next? So fortunately, and this is where we get to the credit union part, fortunately, we were reached out to by Assiniboine Credit Union, who was fairly new to Manitoba back in the 90s. And the bank manager set up an appointment, and we said, wonderful, we'd love to meet you. We had about an hour meeting, and I can tell and share with the member and Manitobans at home that out of that meeting, he secured us a line of credit to operate and continue to keep our doors open so we can continue to grow our business. And that's exactly what he did. But he said something that was very profound and something I'll never forget, and my wife will never forget. And that what he said to us was, and it changed our business and really set us on our career. He said to Jeff and Mick, I want you to do one thing only. You focus on your business and let me focus on the banking. Well, that was fundamental to the change of our business. I can tell you that made a difference. We were able to continue to grow our business. At the time, we had 25 staff. We grew our business to 150 staff in 2 offices in Winnipeg and Brandon. And without that advice and that support from a Manitoba credit union, I can tell the member, I don't know why he's laughing. It's a true story. Certainly, when he can read my book one day, he'll see it in my book, that we were able to continue to grow our business and thrive and help 150 Manitobans support their families. So very good story. And I know the member certainly would have that as a positive takeaway. Let me talk about the suite of opportunities we have for similar businesses like mine. Again, we have a number of programs, $15 million in the Community Economic Development Fund, Futurepreneur, which is really cool, $300K over 4 years, starting up with Futurepreneur. So these are entrepreneurs that are thinking they want to get into the self-employed realm, and guess what? We're going to help them here, and our government's going to help them. $10.1 million to support sector council programs. Met with a number of the program folks over the last several weeks and months. This is $10.1 million over 4 years, so $40.4 million going to support small and medium-sized businesses. $20 million to support economic development and investment attraction. Investment in more than $35 million in loans and guarantees, and an increase, by the way, the member will be happy to know, an increase of $27 million from 22-23 fiscal. $15 million to fund support in Indigenous economic development opportunities related to, again, a number of opportunities to support Indigenous reconciliation and economic reconciliation as we go forward. And again, Manitoba is expecting to have 114,000 new job openings in the next 5 years. Great news for Manitoba businesses as we continue to grow and invest in our economy. And one other, I'll get on the record, Mr. Chair, if you indulge me to, in 2022-23, the innovation
Minister's
growth
time has expired. The honourable member for Fort Garry.
So it's been a very interesting afternoon, Mr. Chair. We heard that the government handed over $100 million of Manitoba taxpayer money with no oversight or safeguards in place to friends of the PC party. There has been no business transactions involved with this fund. No businesses actually have received the funds, and not one job has been created in the 5 years that they've been working this through government. That this fund is, although a Manitoba fund, is administered out of Saskatoon by a company that has a proven track record of losing government money, and it has created a program that is designed not to help one single startup or new business in Manitoba. Do I have that right, Minister? But I'm going to move off on that, and I want the Minister to explain how is this this Frankenstein fund going to be held accountable? Is there going to be an annual report? How are Manitobans going to be able to provide oversight to their dollars, which are very much at risk?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to, again, I didn't want to miss this other great innovation that the government is providing for the, actually 2022-23, the Innovation Growth Fund has awarded $1.3 million to 17 local companies, Mr. Chair. Since 2019, over 50 projects to the tune of $3.9 million to develop and innovate products and help the process with companies here in Manitoba, Mr. Chair. Again, the VENCAP is going to put Manitoba on the map. We are open for business, truly open for business here in Manitoba, and initial results are staggering, fantastic, absolutely exciting. Cannot wait to be able to continue to grow the economy here in Manitoba with the great support of our board. The board that, of course, we talked about earlier, that we mentioned, great Manitobans that have contributed to our, not only to the lives of Manitobans, but to our economy, and will continue to right here in Manitoba, Mr. Chair. Again, I thank them for absolutely their volunteerism and their willingness to ensure that Manitoba becomes the place where you want to settle in, raise a family, bring a business here, grow a business here, start a business here, and continue to grow and thrive and prosper here, right here in Manitoba, Mr. Chair. So with those few comments, I'm sure the member has a few more questions for me. I certainly want to give him time. I see we have some time left. And again, great, exciting times for Manitobans. $25 million invested, $150 million return. I call that a pretty positive ROI for Manitobans.
The honourable member for Fort Garry.
There's no further questions. We're prepared to close out this section.
Seeing no further questions, we now will turn to the resolutions, beginning with the second resolution, as we have deferred consideration of the first resolution containing the minister's salary. At this point, we will allow virtual members to unmute their mics so they can respond to the question on each resolution. Resolution 10.2, resolved that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $13,250,000 for economic development, investment and trade for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2024. Shall the resolution pass? The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 10.3, resolved that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $145,325,000 for economic development, investment and trade workforce and industry programs and partnerships for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2024. Shall the resolution pass? The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 10.4, resolved that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $2,118,000 for economic development, investment and trade, Economic Development Board Secretariat for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2024. Shall the resolution pass? The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 10.5, resolved that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $15,198,000 for economic development, investment and trade, resource development for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2024. Shall the resolution pass? The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 10.6, resolved that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $35 million for economic development, investment and trade, loans and guarantees programs for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2024. Shall the resolution pass? The resolution is accordingly passed. The last item to be considered for the estimates of this department is item 10.1A, the Minister's salary contained in Resolution 10.1. At this point, we request that all ministerial and opposition staff leave the chamber for the consideration of this last item. The floor is open for questions when they leave. Are there any questions? Seeing none, we will proceed to Resolution 10.1. Resolution 10.1. Resolved that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $10,677,000 for economic development, investment and trade, administration and finance for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2024. Shall the resolution pass? The resolution is accordingly passed. This completes the estimates of the Department of Economic Development, Investment and Trade. The next set of estimates to be considered by this section of the Committee of Supply is for the Department of Indigenous Reconciliation and Northern Relations. The Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Is there will to see the clock as 5?
We have to recess until 5.
Recess till 5.
Yeah.
Is it the will of the House to recess until 5 o'clock?
I agree.
This House then is recessed.
This committee
is
in recess till
not
5.
the House, just the committee. Let's get that straight. This committee is recessed and stands recessed until 5 p.m. this afternoon. The hour being 5 p.m., committee rise, call on the Speaker. The hour being 5 p.m., this House is adjourned and stands adjourned until tomorrow morning at 10 a.m.